So if you're thinking about someone else who might be in your role, who's thinking about joining a company that is at that seed Series A stage where they might be the first person with the title of people and culture, are there things that you look for in the founder and the founding team that to you seem like a good foundation to build people and culture around? Or on the opposite side of that, a red flag where you're like, this will be way too hard, or I'm going to be fighting every single day to make this work?
Yes, 100%. Yes. And look, founders are people and they have their pluses and they have their minuses. And I think you have a responsibility if you are either in my position as an HR person who's going to be working closely with them, or you're in any leadership position where you will be working in close partnership with founders. You need to really understand what those pluses and minuses are. And you need to understand more than anything, are those minuses deal breakers for you? Because you can't change them. They are people. They are developed human beings. They are set in their ways to a certain extent. They will change and evolve somewhat, but within reason, right? It's like a relationship, truly, in the sense that you can't fully change the person. And so if some of their icks, for lack of a better phrase, are things that you cannot get over, or just things that trigger you, you probably don't need to work at that company, because at the end of the day, that's going to be an issue time and time again. And so founder alignment is super important. You can challenge them, and you should hopefully find a relationship in which you can challenge them and give them feedback, because of course they need to learn and develop and grow, but they are people, right? And the companies that they have created are a byproduct of themselves. And so if they are somewhat micromanagers, they're going to micromanage the company. That's going to be their natural tendency. They can maybe learn to somewhat do it less as their team becomes bigger and, there's more support, but they're always going to go back to that tendency. And as a result of that, other employees are going to see them do that and also replicate that behavior. And so you somewhat have to always build a culture based on who you have at the top, and you can try to inspire and encourage and evolve the person. But at the end of the day, it is their company and it is their culture. And you have a responsibility of bridging that, right? Bridging the reality on the ground with the founder's vision is a role of HR at a startup company. I think some things I look for, particularly in the HR space, I look for people who understand the role of HR, and more importantly than that, the role that I play in HR, because I'm not every HR person. And so I always make it very clear, this is how I see my role. This is what I think of my role. And this is how I interact with founders and with other people. Because it's not for everybody, right? Some people want more of a talent person who's just going to go out and hire people. Some people want someone who's going to focus mainly on the compliance or kind of benefit admin side of things. And some people want a strategic partner, right? And so there's no harm against what people want and what they may think they need at a given stage. The stage at which you hire an HR person has changed, right? It used to be 100 people when I started, and it became 50 people, and now people are hiring it even earlier than that. But a lot of founders are told to hire HR people by their VCs, by their friends and colleagues, by their other founders that they know in their network, and they don't actually want one. And I learned early on that for me is not a thing I can work around. It's too difficult, and I'm too opinionated for that to work. And so for me, that is something I look for, is why are you hiring this role? What inspired you to hire it at this point in this stage? Particularly if it's super early, like I like to ask, why are you wanting this role? And then what are you looking to influence, and or what are you looking to improve in terms of culture, in terms of diversity and inclusion, in terms of hiring? What are some processes right now that could be improved? That probably more likely than not, depending on what stage you're coming in at, the founders are the ones who did, right? So there's always one founder who developed a lot of the processes that I would be taking over. And so I like to ask, like, where are the improvements needed to be? That's some of the things I like to suss out or, investigate. But I would say founders that I really enjoy working with are people who really know themselves. That goes a really long way. People who acknowledge who they are. I have founders who, some founders who are more removed from the day-to-day, and they know that about themselves. They like being a more macro level salesperson out in the world, talking to investors, talking to clients. They don't really care as much about the operational internal thing. So acknowledging that goes a long way. So knowing who you are, and a lot of founders are younger than me now, which is weird. When I joined startups, I was the same age as them, and now I'm becoming the older one. But a lot of founders are young and don't know themselves. And so I think a founder that knows themselves and knows their weaknesses and strengths goes a really long way. Founders who hire people around them who are better at their job than them. I alluded to that earlier, but I think that also is super inspiring. founders who identify like, hey, I've never led an engineering team before, so I need to hire a CTO or someone to lead engineering as quickly as possible because we're a tech company and we need someone to build this thing. So people that bring people in who have done this before and or who fill a gap that they have is a sign of great leadership and strength. And then co-founders who are active in the ways in which they're active. That doesn't mean they have to be involved in every single decision, but they need to be approachable and reachable, and they need to figure out a way to provide feedback and or ideas, because I love founder ideas. I think they have better ideas than most people, but sometimes the ways in which they give those ideas, they never really know exactly how to do it. And because they aren't always available or reachable, they sometimes go weeks, months, quarters without giving feedback. And so making sure that the founder is open to creating a line of communication. It doesn't have to be a weekly meeting. Maybe it does for that founder, but figuring out the way in which that founder needs to be gotten a hold of, and then going out and trying to do that, whether that be a Slack channel, whether that be a monthly meeting, a quarterly meeting, a weekly meeting, finding the founder where they are and making sure you get a hold of them because you're going to need them, right? So making sure that founders understand that is important. Things I look out for are people who don't know themselves, obviously. I think that's a really big one. People who have yet to discover what they're good at and what they're not good at, and who really lean into their weaknesses as a sign of insecurity because they don't know how to effectively lead yet, and they don't know what their strengths are and haven't been told, especially if they haven't been in the workplace for a long period of time. It's hard because I have so much feedback on what my weaknesses are because I've gotten it for 8 to 10 years at this point. A co-founder that just graduated from a major university and started a company, the only feedback they ever got were from professors or maybe their families and friends, and that's a very different type of feedback. And so I think that can be a challenge and something that at this stage of my career, I don't have the patience or time or willingness to want to be that first person for them necessarily. And then the second thing would be listening to the people around them. I think a lot of founders hire people around them, either based on VC feedback or founder feedback, or because they think that this person is the right person, but they don't necessarily have a tendency or willingness to want to listen and actually take the advice and counsel of those around them. And so I look for founders who do that, who want to listen, who acknowledge their weaknesses and want to take the time in which to learn and grow. So those are things I look for. I've been fortunate to find that in my last several companies. And I think it took me a little bit of time to learn what things are really non-starters for me. It really is like dating in a way, in the sense that it takes you some time to learn what managers are good and what managers are bad, and what style you can deal with and what style you can't, right? Like I can deal with micromanagement. Micromanage me all day. I can deal with it because I can laugh it off. I can kind of shrug it off. I can deal with it. That's something I can deal with. Some people, that is a deal breaker for them. I can't deal with lack of communication. That is micromanagement almost is better to me because at least you're communicating. Someone who's completely unreachable and aloof and floating all over the ether, that to me is impossible to manage because I don't know what to do with it. And so everyone has their own things, and it might take you a time or two to figure it out. I say if you have recently joined a company and maybe a co-founder or a founder is not fitting and it is not a fit, accept that, look to move on when the timing is right, and try to acknowledge if it is changeable or not. Because I think a lot of times people stay with the founders even when that there isn't that connection, and they stay for way longer than they should have. And so don't be afraid to move if you need to move. The market is way more accepting of that now. I think tenures are less important. I don't even look at tenures at companies anymore. I think it's irrelevant, especially post-COVID, where people have just naturally moved a lot because, again, the market was what it was and people were making decisions relatively quickly. And so I think don't be afraid of that and take a leap of faith if you feel there is that synergy there. If there is synergy with founders, you can do incredible work, and it will be the most exciting, parts of your career. So that synergy is really, really important.